Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode here at Catholic Table Talk Podcast. This is the podcast where everything Catholic is on the table once again for this week. Thank you again for taking the time to listen or watch the show this week on all of our platforms. Episode 126 today, and we'll kind of take another turn back into the book series. Holiday, I call it holiday books to get. It's actually a playlist you can find on my YouTube channel. Just look down the YouTube channels and look for books to get on the playlist. And basically, we've been doing researching and looking at a lot of different books from a lot of different authors, getting ready for the holiday season. Today's book is The Gospel Truth. Gary Michuta is the author, so he will be back on to talk about his story about writing it and what we should take away from it and what you have to look forward to when reading the book, if it's for you or for a loved one or for a friend. Before we get to that, though, again, like I said, thank you again for taking the time to watch and listen to the episode. Without you, the show would not be possible. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the show so we can help reach more people and spread the good news about the faith and just the great stuff about the show every day. Also, if you have a speaker or a show topic request, please email us at catholictt@gmail.com. Again, it's catholictt@gmail.com, the official email of Catholic Table Talk Podcast. Also, last thing, today's episode is brought to us by, again, Dr. Katrina Wynn. Dr. Wynn is a physician and medical doctor. See how she can help you, your family, and your community out at mdkatrina.com. Also at mycatholicdoctor.com. Thank you for Dr. Katrina Wynn for sponsoring today's show. And she has sponsored a ton of shows this past year, so make sure you give her a shout out as well and look into her website. All right, like I said, today's show, we're going to talk about the Gospel Truth, authored by Gary Michuta. Also, he has a radio show host, radio show called Hangs on Projects, if I can say it right. So, coming from the Midwest Command Center, author and radio show host Gary Michuta. Gary, thank you again for taking the time out of your day to come back on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me back, Billy. I appreciate it.
Yeah, a little bit of technical difficulties before the show, but we got to work okay. So I was glad to have you back in the mix here on the show. So like I said, we've been kind of going through a lot of different books throughout, getting ready for the holiday season to get people get on the wish list and everything. And your book has been out for most of this year, and you've been doing all these other great interviews throughout the year on the book. And the book is called The Gospel Truth. So basically, again, this is kind of, I guess, a broad question maybe, but just how did the inspiration about writing the book came to be? And, why do it on the Gospels? Or is it just kind of one Gospel or just the Gospels as a whole, I should say?
Yeah. Well, all my books, it's usually I'm just accumulating really cool stuff that I find over the years. And then eventually I got so much that I think, I'm ready to write a book because I'm going to start forgetting it all.
Sure.
And, the impetus for this really is, the rise of new atheism and a lot of skeptical thinking, especially out on social media. And there's some really great books out there that defend the authenticity and of the Gospels, right? And they're written by evangelicals. But over the years, what I've noticed is that the evangelical defense is really thin because it categorically rejects sacred tradition. And so they can do some things very well in terms of showing the historicity of the New Testament and things like that. But there's other areas that it's incredibly thin. And I've noticed before I started writing my book, I noticed how atheists are picking up on that and they're attacking those thin areas that Protestants fear to tread because they can see it for what it is. It's a weakness. And so I put together the book because I thought as a Catholic, we can have a really good, robust defense of the Gospels, why we believe they're true, why we know they didn't lie, how we know their integrity, and even answers questions like the canon and proper interpretation of Scripture. And as you know, Billy, the canon and proper interpretation of Scripture is kind of the Achilles heel of Protestantism. They really don't have a good defense for that.
Right.
So I put the book together, and so far it seems like it's been pretty well received.
Awesome. Yeah, and just I'm glad that you mentioned that, a lot of atheism going on in the world. I mean, when I first saw the book and everything, I'm like, my first thought was it was for like, Protestants, and I'm like, this could be a good book for Protestants. I'm like, but it seems like they kind of, even though we disagree on maybe what Jesus is talking about in the Gospels, but I feel like we still have a good understanding of, or good, what you call agreement that it's actually true. But yeah, it's more for atheism, which is, I mean, totally on the rise in this in the world today. And yeah, so great. I'm happy for you that you're getting great feedback about the book. And yeah, so that's really cool.
Thanks.
Yeah. So I always look I don't have the physical book in front of me right now, Gary, but when I see a new book and I learn about the new book and I have it, I look over the table of contents and I see which chapters really stand out to me. I know it just might sound kind of weird, but I've just been doing it since I was little. And I might
Yeah.
skip to that chapter. When I was looking over the table of contents for your book, chapter 7 really just struck me. I'm not really sure why, but just I really like the name. Chapter 7, text, canon, and content. So like, what's in it? Why should people really read chapter 7? Again, that just really struck me as this could be a very rich and um really rich and meaty chapter.
Yeah, well, that's cool. Yeah, I wouldn't expect that because I have a couple, I'm pretty proud of the chapter names in this book.
Sure.
Like my favorite's Dare to Verify. I think that was
Okay.
kind of cool. But
Yeah.
text, text, canon, and meaning, what the whole book is like built layer upon layer, and each step of the book, what I want to do is I want people to become curious, right? I want it to be
Sure.
like you're watching a CSI episode or something like that, where you have the bump bums,
Oh yeah.
the moments, because Billy, in this world, most people don't even know about Jesus, and if they do, they don't know why he's important or why they should even look into his claims, right? So I want to build curiosity. I want them to say, wow, there's something really weird about this Jesus of Nazareth, and there's something really weird about these gospels as well. And so what I do is all through I'm laying the foundation, building those bumps parts where it's like, why is it that these gospels exhibit uh, evidence that Jesus tapped into this rabbi-disciple relationship? And why is it that the Greek Gospels at times speak Hebrew? And why is it that there's all these memory devices? And why are some of the memory devices hidden underneath the Greek? Like you don't even see that if you're reading in the original Greek. And and you eventually get to the point where no, this couldn't be a hoax because it's just way too over-engineered to be a hoax. And then so I then moved to meaning. I pose the question, well, okay, even if you could show me that these gospels are, passing on reliably, messages that they've heard before, how do you know any of it's true? And that's where the dare to verify comes in, where I show, it's just a question of putting yourself in the first century sandals of the original writers. You can have lots of really good reasons why that what is recorded actually happened. And then that's the lead up to the chapter that you mentioned, Billy. So yeah, there is a purpose to everything I've been saying.
Right.
It's like once we reach that point where it's like, okay, we can verify that the gospels are truthfully telling us things that actually happened, it was verified, then we move one step further and we can say, okay, just based on those principles that I laid down earlier, we can establish that our copies of the Gospels are substantially identical to the originals. We can establish which books belong in the canon or the scripture, which is called the canon. And we can also establish the meaning of the text based on some principles that we laid down. So it's kind of what I want to do. And those, except for the canon, usually, Protestants will focus on the integrity of the text, that our text corresponds to the original. They usually are terrible when it comes to the canon, and they're terrible when it comes to meaning. So it's kind of like if I've led non-Catholics who are reading this book, but believers to this point, it's like, hey, you get everything. These principles aren't only true for verifying the Gospels, but they're also true for verifying the meaning, verifying the canon, and even verifying the text, which evangelicals are really good at. And so, yeah, I don't know if I answered what you said, but it's kind of like we have to go a little earlier and lay down those methodologies to kind of pull that out. But what I want to show is like how powerful this methodology is, that you don't just end up with verified gospels, you end up with the whole thing. You end up with the meaning, you end up with canon, you end up with a verifiable text as well.
Which is, I mean, I think it's a really smart thing to do. It's a really great thing to do, laying those blocks and showing the verification for it. So I applaud you for that, because that sounds, I mean, that's just a really smart thing to do. And
thanks.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, that's where when I saw the table of contents, like I could skip to chapter 7, and I'm like, that's probably not a smart thing to do. I should probably read the whole book, especially from apologetic side of things. I should probably read the book and get to chapter 7 before I skip to chapter 7. But yeah, like you said, I mean, you kind of, I mean, I watch a lot of CSI and NCIS stuff at my grandpa's place during college, so I get what you mean. You kind of build that stuff up, and once you start building stuff, it's really easy just to keep going, and you don't want to stop. So, like I said, that's a smart thing to do. And yeah, I mean, like I said, that's just where Protestantism and Catholicism really kind of separates. Just really having the canon, like you said, the scripture, the just the verification of it is just really where we really don't agree on a lot of things.
Yeah.
So yeah, which is really sad anyway. But
yeah. So it's helpful for non-Catholics, and it's helpful for non-believers too, because it shows that all this is just anchored in common sense and reason. It's you don't have to be a rocket science to to be able to provide the reasons why we believe in these things.
And that's a great way to put it. That's just for common sense, not rocket science. So awesome.
Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, like I said, this book's been out for a little bit now. We've got a lot of great interviews with it, and a lot of great feedback from it. One, just looking up reviews, like I tend to do with a lot of books too. This is from one of them was from Amazon. It says Gary Michuta has put together an extraordinary work that is sure to enrich every Christ lover with its joy through the clarity of the faith and the shedding of common micro captions. It should also be noted that the footnotes are a treasure trove waiting to be looked at. So that's another thing I like about the book, or in the books, is footnotes. And I guess just a opening question, just throwing this out there at you. Again, I mean, which are like the footnotes, and like, because footnotes, I either read them or I don't read them. So just what do the footnotes help out with, I should say, in the book?
Yeah, I'm trying to cut down on footnotes, because I realize people, when they open up a book and they see a bunch of footnotes, kind of turns them off. But so I try to keep it to a minimum. Footnotes are awesome, because it's like, if you want to really dive deep into a subject and find some really good material on the subject, that's where you find it in the footnotes. You can look up text and maybe pick it up, or sometimes it's available free online. And you can find some really, really valuable resources in the footnotes. And so, my book, most of this is not something that I've come up with. I'm kind of building on the scholarship of others.
Sure.
So, there's some classics that I have listed in the footnotes. And I even, usually if it's like some long translation of something, I'll put it in the footnotes just because I don't want the reader to be daunted by it. But yeah, so I appreciate that. Like I said, I love going through footnotes in books. I found some really amazing works I never would have heard of if I didn't find it in the footnote. So that's just a good apologetic hack for you guys out there, right?
There you go.
You want to find some good resources, read in a book, and if he's making a really good point and there's footnote, that might be a book you might want to pick up or look at.
Definitely, absolutely. So I guess only a couple questions left here, Gary. I mean, we talked about a little bit more, talked about people's reaction to the book. I guess just a little bit more in detail when you first start talking about writing the book to when you were writing the book to now it's published, released, being read by thousands of people. Just what was that? What was the review of that? Just through the process. Was there a lot of negativity with other non-Christians, non-Catholics? Yeah, just a little bit more in detail, I guess.
Yeah. Well, the reaction actually has been very positive.
Okay.
Of course,
Nice.
this is put out by Emmaus Road Press, so it's a Catholic publisher. So it's in Catholic bookstores. And so our first audience is Catholic audience. They seem to appreciate it. There really isn't much out there written by Catholics that do what I do. They certainly don't go into the whole defense that I do as far as building out sacred tradition and stuff like that. So that's been very positive. In fact, I was at down in Steubenville meeting with the Emmaus Road publishers, actually Scott Hahn and my friend Rob Corzine. And Scott was pretty enthusiastic about the book. So, I mean, hey, if Scott Hahn gives you a thumbs up on a book,
Right.
I mean, that just made my career. I mean, have Scott give a thumbs up. In fact, I was interviewed by Scott on the book, and that was a hoot as well. I don't think it's really feathered too much into Protestantism, but it eventually will. It'll just take longer because, the first and primary audience is Catholics. But hopefully Catholics will get the book and hand it to Protestants. And I'm also hoping they'll hand it to non-believers as well. I'd love this because in a way I kind of walked the non-believer presuming nothing.
Sure.
And like in my very first, the very first thing I have in my book, I just want them to become intrigued about this Jesus of Nazareth and why he's important and what's so odd about him, what's so strange that you would want to know more about him, So I start off at the very beginning that, there's these, and it's all based on history. This is not conjecture either, that there's that the pagan historians and Jewish historians recognized there was an oracle that was spreading in the first century about a ruler that would rule the inhabitable earth, and he would come out of Judea. And in the first century, there was like all these pretenders to be this governor, this leader that was prophesied. And the pagans thought it was Vespasian and Titus. The Jews thought it was the Messiah, but they didn't think the Messiah came. So you had first Jewish revolt, which just almost destroyed Judaism completely. And it ended up with the destruction of the temple based on these false messiahs. And then you have a second revolt. If that wasn't worse, Billy, you would think they would give up on the prophecy and say this is a fraud. But no, they follow another false Messiah like a couple of decades later against Rome, which is like suicidal, all based on this prophecy.
Right.
And they get almost, I mean, it almost eradicates Judaism. It's a miracle Judaism survived the aftermath of that revolt. Um, so, you know, who was this a false oracle? Was it a true oracle? Who was, there were the pagans right that it was about the emperors Vespasian and Titus? And then it's like, well, he's supposed to have a worldwide kingdom that lasts forever. And you look around today, it's like most people never heard of Vespasian, right?
Yeah.
And may not have heard of Titus. And most people aren't even familiar with the empire, Roman Empire.
Which
That's
is
gone.
which is
And
almost hard to
yeah,
believe with it being that big that way back in history. But yeah, you're right.
yeah, yeah. And then you have this Jesus of Nazareth, this itinerant Jewish rabbi who was born, grew up in Nazareth, a tiny little town that most people didn't think it existed until we found evidence for it. And today, you have the church all over the world proclaiming Jesus as the Messiah and Son of God. It's like, who is this Jesus, this weird little rabbi that come in out of nowhere in the first century, seems to have fulfilled this prophecy that almost led to the destruction of the temple or the people of God twice.
Yeah.
So, I'm trying to build a sense of like something weird going on here, that deserves inspection. So anyway, so yeah, so I'm hoping it'll get into the hands of non-Catholics because, like I said, I start at the very beginning, just trying to make things really interesting and intriguing. That all these little clues and pointers, and ultimately, at the end of the book, you find out it's all true, right?
Right. Oh yeah. That's a good
So,
point. Yeah.
so I'm hoping that will circulate eventually into non-Catholic hands. In fact, I'm probably going to start giving my book to a few evangelicals
Sure.
and see what they think. That will be interesting.
Yeah, I bet you have to keep me up to date on that.
Yeah.
That'd be something to hear about, that's for sure. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, you would think like since Roman Empire, I mean, a lot of people never really heard of that before. Or I mean, like just atheism, go back to atheism. I mean, it is on the rise, and there's a lot of people don't believe in God. They don't know, God. They're like, who is this Jesus? And we have it pretty well, I think, in America. I mean, it's getting not great, but it's just a really great country for religion, and it's kind of easy to be in your own communities and your own home, and you're like, there's a lot of people that don't know who Jesus is or don't even believe him. And yeah, and that's why we gotta spread the word and like you say, get the book out about him. Yeah. So just wrapping up the show, Gary. I guess make one good putting on the spot, I guess. But make one good, sales pitch of why people should get this for the loved ones for Christmas or the birthdays, and then like, is this again? I mean, I guess this is for anyone, especially atheism. But is this a good book to get your teenagers who may be looking at confirmation? Is this a good book maybe for the young group as well? Kind of what's the age limit? What would you say on this book?
Yeah. Well, it's definitely a book. If anybody has maybe kids that have left the faith, maybe they think that Christianity is a hoax or myth or legend, or maybe somebody that's teetering on their faith, that they're watching skeptical websites and they're starting to question whether Christianity is true. This is a great book for them. It's also a great book for people who love scripture and into Bible studies, because I dig into all sorts of really cool stuff with the Gospels that you probably never noticed or you read a million times and never really picked up on it. It's also good for, of course, non-Catholics that want to believe in the Gospels. Um, you could just that'd be a great Christmas gift because it's non-threatening, right? Because I'm defending what they want to defend, and I'm actually showing them how to do a really, really good job doing it. Not
Right.
because I did a really good job writing it, but the
But
material I'm giving from others is excellent. And a confirmation gift, that's, I guess it would have to depend on whether the person likes to read
sure,
and isn't intimidated by text. If we're talking like an eighth or ninth grader, it might be a little too much for them.
sure,
But if you're talking like a young adult or maybe somebody that's entering into the church through OCIA, that's definitely a great book for them.
definitely. Yeah. I mentioned that. All right, yeah. So the book is called The Gospel Truth. That's from Gary Michuta. Like I said, find it in your Catholic bookstore, and like Gary said, I can put it into the hands of a non-believer and see what they say and have them get back to you on it. So again, Gary, really great job on the book. Like I
Thanks.
said, I don't know why chapter 7 stood out to me the
That's
way it
awesome.
did, but it did.
Yeah,
So but yeah, so again, thank you again for coming back on the show twice in about a month to just hear your words of wisdom and about the Catholic doctrines of the church as well as the book, and take some time off the show now, and happy holidays, and God bless you, and thank you all of you for the faith and all you've done for me and my podcast career, and hope to talk to you again in 2024.
awesome. Hey, Billy, it's a pleasure and keep up the great work. This is a great show.
Awesome. Thank you for saying that. That is Gary Michuta, everyone. Once again, he's the author of The Gospel Truth. Also, many other great books. He's the host of Hangs on Apologetics. Sorry for mispronouncing that at the start of the show, everyone, but we'll show Hangs on Apologetics every weekday at 1 p.m. Eastern on Voyager Most Powerful Radio. Also, he can be found at GaryMichuta.com. Look down in the description box below for all of Gary's links. We'll have them there. Also, if you have a question on the book or anything, email them or drop them down in the comments below, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. With that being said, we're out of time for today, but God bless you. God willing, we'll see you again next week. So go to the sacrament, stay in state of grace, and put this book on your wish list for sure as we move closer to the holidays here at Catholic Table Talk Podcast, the podcast where everything Catholic is on the table.